What happens to a person after 70 that makes them stop explaining themselves, stop defending their choices, and quietly step away from conversations they once fought so hard to win? Most people think it's tiredness or stubbornness or emotional withdrawal. But the truth is far more profound and far more powerful, because silence in later life is not a loss of voice. It is the refinement of it, a deliberate choice shaped by decades of experience. Disappointment, joy, regret, survival, and clarity. And wise seniors over 70 do not choose silence because they have nothing left to say. They choose it because they have finally learned what is worth saying and what is not. After a lifetime of explaining intentions that were misunderstood, justifying decisions that were deeply personal, defending values that never needed defense, and arguing with people who were never truly listening, something shifts inside, a quiet realization that time is no longer endless. Energy is no longer abundant, and peace is no longer optional. And once this realization takes root, the need to explain begins to fade, because explanations demand emotional labor, and emotional labor is expensive at this stage of life, not just mentally, but physically, affecting sleep, heart health, stress levels, and overall well-being. And wise seniors understand this instinctively, often without being able to articulate it. So they simplify, they withdraw from unnecessary debates. They stop correcting every misunderstanding. They stop reacting to every opinion. And instead they observe, they pause, they choose silence as a shield. Because silence does something words cannot do. It protects inner peace. And for someone who has lived through wars, economic hardship, personal loss, broken relationships, failed dreams, health scares, and the slow realization that life rarely turns out exactly as planned, peace becomes the ultimate achievement. More valuable than approval, more important than being right, and far more satisfying than winning arguments that change nothing. And this is why silence among the wise elderly is often misunderstood by younger generations who still believe that self-worth comes from being heard, validated, and agreed with. But seniors over 70 have already lived through that stage. They know how exhausting it is to constantly explain yourself to people who see the world through their own filters, biases, and insecurities. And they know that explanations rarely change minds. They only drain the explicable, and there is a deep dignity that develops with age. A quiet confidence that does not announce itself, that does not demand attention, that does not need to prove anything anymore, because life itself has already done the proving. And this dignity expresses itself through restraint, through knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, and often through choosing silence over explanation, especially in family relationships where expectations can be heavy and boundaries blurry, where seniors are often asked to explain why they live differently now, why they travel less or more, why they prefer solitude, why they no longer attend every gathering, why they say no without guilt. And after decades of being available, responsible, dependable, and self-sacrificing, silence becomes a form of reclaiming autonomy, a way of saying without words, I have given enough, I have explained enough. Now I choose what remains. And this silence is not cold. It is not punishment. It is not rejection. It is self-preservation. Because wise seniors understand that every explanation invites judgment. Every justification opens the door to debate. And every debate risks disturbing the calm they worked so hard to build. And calm does not come easily. It comes after years of inner conflict. After learning that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. After realizing that being understood by everyone is impossible, and being at peace with yourself is enough. And this is why silence becomes selective rather than absolute. Because wise seniors do speak, but only where there is respect, only where there is genuine curiosity, only where there is emotional safety. And to everyone else, they offer quiet distance, polite smiles, short responses, and the wisdom of non-engagement. And this choice is often mistaken for weakness or indifference. But it is neither. It is strength refined by time. Because it takes courage to stop explaining yourself in a world that constantly demands justification. And it takes wisdom to accept that some people are committed to misunderstanding you, no matter how clearly you speak. And once you accept that, silence stops feeling like suppression and starts feeling like freedom. And there is also grief woven into this silence. The grief of realizing that some relationships were sustained only by your effort, your explanations, your emotional labor. And once you stop explaining, those relationships fade. And wise seniors accept this loss without drama, without bitterness, because they understand that relationships that cannot survive silence were never truly mutual. And this understanding is painful but liberating. And it reshapes how seniors move through the world, how they travel, how they spend their days, how they choose companions, how they structure their routines, and how they protect their time. Because time after 70 is no longer something to waste on convincing others of your worth, your choices, or your truth. And wise seniors also understand something younger people often don't. That silence can communicate boundaries more effectively than words ever could. Because words invite negotiation, silence ends it. And when someone stops explaining, it forces others to sit with their own assumptions, their own discomfort, their own need for control. And this is why silence unsettles people who thrive on conflict or dominance. Because it removes the fuel they rely on. And wise seniors no longer offer fuel to fires they did not start. And there is a spiritual dimension to this silence as well. A sense that life has already taught its lessons. That the need to convince has been replaced by the desire to simply be. To experience mornings without urgency, conversations without tension, travel without schedules driven by others' expectations, and days measured not by productivity but by peace. And silence supports this way of living because it simplifies interactions and reduces emotional clutter. And the body responds to this simplicity with better health, deeper rest, and steadier moods. And this is not accidental. It is learned wisdom, often learned through pain. And perhaps the most important truth behind why wise seniors prefer silence over explanation is this. Explaining yourself is often an unconscious attempt to be accepted. And after 70, acceptance must come from within or it will never come at all. And once seniors internalize this, they stop seeking permission to live as they choose. They stop narrating their lives for others' approval. And they start living quietly, intentionally, and authentically. And this authenticity feels unfamiliar to those who expect constant availability and emotional transparency. But it feels deeply right to those who have earned it. And if you listen closely, the silence of wise seniors is not empty. It is full of lessons, boundaries, self-respect, and earned peace. And the suggestion at the end of this reflection is simple but transformative. If you are over 70 or approaching that stage of life, begin treating your words and explanations as precious resources. Offer them only to those who meet you with respect and understanding. Release the urge to defend your choices. Allow silence to protect your peace. And remember that you do not owe anyone an explanation for a life you have already lived with honesty and courage.